help me out here. I'm going to obviously throw out the obvious question. What is the logic behind Keir Starmer's Palestine pledge? I make this point every day, and I made it yesterday when we had a very eminent barrister on with us talking about the Israeli position and the nonsense of recognising Palestine as a legitimate state, stroke country, etc. And of course, I'm fully aware that you could have a scholar of Middle East studies who would come on and tell you the very opposite. And I can't really think of but I've done this job longer than most people, and I can't honestly think of all the divisive issues that are out there, whether it's sort of Brexit or COVID or whatever it is. I can't think of one that so perfectly divides the room. And I don't mean divides it 50-50. I don't think it does that. But it certainly divides it in the emphatic nature of people's arguments, depending on which side they are on. And you can interview an Israeli scholar, you can interview a Palestinian scholar. They will cite the same dates and timelines and points of history, but will belch out completely different interpretations of events. And it's those deeply entrenched positions that I've never been able to kind of circumnavigate. And it's one of those areas, you think, well, unless you're a scholar of the Middle East, you might think, stay out of this and allow the experts to give you all the opinion and information you need. But while the experts divide so passionately on either side around the very same issue, talking about the very same chronology of the area and the region, you scratch your head and you think, well, what the hell am I supposed to believe on this? So there's that as a kind of backdrop to all of this. But there is, I think, with this particular situation, something slightly bamboozling, regardless of what side you're on. And I'd like to acknowledge this. I'm going to lift the words of journalistic colleague Andrew Neil on this one, because he put it brilliantly in a very simple post on X last night. So maybe you can come at it from this position. He's not the only one that's thrown this up, but he just put it rather well. And he says this: the British government position over recognising Palestine is unravelling fast tonight, or at least bereft of logical explanation. From official UK government statements, it seems that Keir Starmer's position is that if a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel is reached because Hamas release all the hostages, the UK will not recognise Palestine. So not sure what's in it for Hamas, but if no ceasefire is reached because Hamas refuses to release all the hostages, the UK will recognise Palestine, brackets, whatever that means. Talk about perverse incentives, he says. With Starmer in Downing Street and Lammy at the Foreign Office, they are increasingly the keystone cops of UK foreign policy. So that very simple point is, I think, where this sort of discussion begins, really, trying to fathom the logic. What is the logic behind Keir Starmer's Palestinian pledge? What we do know is the minute that Starmer announced this, all hell broke loose. The United States divorced any kinship with the UK on this point, and Israel's rejection came literally within about 110 seconds of Keir Starmer making this point. Just after he'd finished speaking, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu posted a fiercely worded denunciation on social media. It's funny how the world now sort of exists on social media. He's posted it on it. Something that once upon a time was just for geeks. Geeks and liars, really. But now it's everywhere. Well, it's still geeks and liars, really. We're talking about politicians. Netanyahu said this: Starmer rewards Hamas's monstrous terrorism and punishes its victims. A jihadist state on Israel's border today will threaten Britain tomorrow. Appeasement towards jihadist terrorists always fails. It will fail you too. It will not happen. So there's his point, that not only is this perverse and unfathomable, he uses the word monstrous terrorism. He's talking about harass, and that's the bit, isn't it? I mean, to me, it doesn't actually tick any of the boxes. If you look at all the boxes that need to be ticked to be recognised as a state, then I'm struggling to find anywhere that it that it does that. And if you look at the conventions that are usually required when it comes to is it the Montevideo agreement, where you get the idea of what a state needs to be? It's got to have a stable government, stable borders, it's, you know, all of that. Then it doesn't even reach that criteria. Forget about whatever your passionate moral argument is or your idea of trying to achieve peace. So we'll take some comment on that, please. What is the logic behind Keir Starmer's Palestine pledge? Details 0344 499 1000. Leave a voice note there as well. If you want to leave a pithy and very succinct message and bypass the queues, leave a voice note on that number, 0344 499 1000. We've got a trio of voices we're going to be speaking to in just a bit on this very point. Before we do, let's speak to Chloe Dobbs, political commentator, a regular with us on the programme. Afternoon to you, Chloe.
Afternoon, Ian.
Nice to have you with us.
Back after you were missing last week.
Yeah, missing in action somewhere. I can't even remember. It was so good what I did. I can't even remember what it was. There you go. That is the rock and roll life of working here at Talk, of course. And I'm off for another 3 days after this. So more of that later. But first, back to Keir Starmer. Let's have a listen to what he said yesterday.
I've always said that we will recognise a Palestinian state as a contribution to a proper peace process at the moment of maximum impact for the two-state solution. With that solution now under threat, this is the moment to act. So today, as part of this process towards peace, I can confirm the UK will recognise the state of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September, unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to a ceasefire, and commit to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a two-state solution.
Reviving the prospect of a two-state solution. To be honest, Chloe, I suppose the only thing we're really asking here is, can you find the logic in Mr. Starmer's argument here?
No, there was almost no logic to it whatsoever. I mean, what is very clear to me is that he has fallen for the Hamas propaganda. He said there that Israel needs to take significant steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza. There he's referring to the aid situation, and just after that clip, after it was cut off there, he says that Israel needs to allow the UN to continue distributing aid. The UN is perfectly capable of distributing aid. They're simply not doing it. I mean, Israel have to try and counter this Hamas propaganda about the aid situation. They've clearly put out drone footage and brought in journalists to show them the pallets and pallets of aid that are sat there rotting in the sun, that Israel has allowed in, that the UN hasn't picked up. And someone yesterday, I'll tell you the figures because I think this is astonishing. These are the UN's figures from their monitoring and tracking dashboard. You can go in and see how many crates, how many pallets of aid have been offloaded and how many have actually been picked up by the UN. And from the start of July, there have been over 17,000 pallets of aid dropped off. But less than 8,000 of those pallets have actually been picked up. So around 60% of those pallets of aid that have been dropped off, the UN is just leaving there to rot in the sun. There's loads of baby food there that can be fed to the starving children. They are not picking it up. And nearly all, about 90% of the few pallets that they did pick up, on their own figures, the UN's figures, are being intercepted by people like Hamas terrorists who steal that aid and sell it to people at extortionate prices so that they can keep on funding their war and keep the population obedient, because they won't let you buy the food off them if you aren't obeying them, right? Hamas and the UN are the ones to blame here. But you've got Keir Starmer stood there, who's clearly only read a few headlines and not actually looked at the figures, and he thinks that Israel is on purpose starving all of these children in Gaza. He's an idiot, and I really think that what he said yesterday, it feels to me like it could be a career-ending moment for him. I mean, I know his approval ratings are terrible enough as it is, but this has infuriated everybody on both sides. The people who are pro-Israel are saying, you're literally you know, rewarding terrorists here and encouraging Hamas. I mean, you said that, you know, you referred to it as perverse incentives. It encourages Hamas not to release the hostages and not to lay down their arms, what he has said. And then the people who are very pro-Palestine are saying you should be recognizing a Palestinian state regardless. You shouldn't be using that as a bargaining chip and saying you might recognize one, you might not. So this is disastrous. I think this is probably the perfect example of someone trying to please everybody but consequently pleasing nobody.
I said at the beginning, it's always been, you know, by definition, it's a very divisive issue, and, you know, depending on which scholar you speak to, they'll give you different interpretations of it. But there are some irredeemables in all of this. As far as I understand it, back, 90 years or whatever it was, certain conventions about what constitutes a state. I think there's sort of 3 or 4 kind of big criteria there that you're meant to hit. One is a stable government. Well, I mean, there is no stable government. There's 2 authorities, a PLO, of course, in the West Bank, and then there's Hamas running the show on the Gaza Strip. Now, that's not a stable government. Firstly, it's not one government, it's 2. One of them is a terrorist organisation. So how does even that, on that point alone, if nothing else, we can get into the issues around, you know, whether it has a stable population, border issues. Again, these are boxes you're supposed to tick before you can even be talked about as a state. It doesn't even hit any of that, and that's putting aside the moral arguments around what's been happening.
Well, first of all, I couldn't help but think there when you said border issues might mean you don't qualify to be a state. I thought, maybe the UK doesn't qualify to be one.
Yeah.
But second of all, taking the decision to recognise a country as a state is usually something that is given as a reward for that state taking significant steps to, you know, become a proper democracy, to respect human rights, treat their people well. And Keir Starmer's statement, the terms on which he's going to recognise a state, I mean, it kind of does the complete and utter opposite. He could have stood there and said, we will recognise the state of Palestine if and when Hamas agrees to end its rule in Gaza. Not just release the hostages, but end its rule in Gaza. Step down and let the Arab states who are now, you know, wanting to come in and set up a stable government there, let them do that. Then we will recognise the state. Why is he putting the onus on Israel?
So, it's extraordinary. And that would be... Everybody would support Starmer on that point. They would go, OK, no, it's back to the obvious 2-state solution issue. We know that's not easy. But the order of words used and the intent would have been sound, even if it eventually came to nothing. Yeah, release the hostages, Hamas stand down, and then, you know, we can bring in all the various parties that are needed to make this happen. Very simple.
Yeah, and Starmer, he did, because he didn't want to come across too pro-Hamas in that speech. He did talk about releasing the hostages. He did get the word right that time. He didn't say sausages. And he did talk about Hamas laying down their arms. But ultimately, it was very clear that his message was, in the end, this is about Israel. Israel are the ones who are starving kids, and Israel are the ones that need to agree to a ceasefire. Israel have said time and time again, every time a ceasefire deal is proposed, we had Egypt put one forward some time ago. Israel has said, we won't agree to this ceasefire deal unless it says that Hamas lays down their arms and ends their rule in Gaza. That's the only way you end up with a long-term end to this. Israel is absolutely ready for a ceasefire as long as Hamas lays down their arms. It's Hamas who keeps saying, no, we are not going to do that. Why aren't we blaming Hamas? Why is Israel getting the blame for literally everything in this war? It's crazy.
Yeah. Let's move to this story. We're going to take calls and voice notes on that issue of the logic behind the Palestinian pledge from Keir Starmer. 0344 499 1000. I just want to get this story in as well. Knife crime in London surged 86% in the last decade. The West End seeing more offences than 15% of the rest of the capital combined. Shockingly, just 5% of robberies, 0.6% of street thefts were solved last year. I mean, it is bad. You wonder who's running the show. Oh, I remember who's running the show. Pretty much for the best part of that decade. Sadiq Khan. Let's have a reminder what a recent visitor to this country said about Mr. Khan.
I'm not a fan of your mayor. Why not? I think he's done a terrible job, the mayor of London. But a nasty person. I think he's done. I think he's a friend of mine, right? No, I think he's done a terrible job. But But I would certainly visit London, yeah.
I love that. He's a friend of mine. We've still done a terrible job. Very honest stuff, Chloe, from Donald Trump.
Yeah, very honest, and I'm glad that Donald Trump had the guts to say it. You know, he's the last time that Starmer met with Trump when they went and sat in the Oval Office, I think Trump was being very careful to be very kind to Starmer and not to criticise him or his policies. But in Scotland, I mean, I thought it was quite embarrassing for Keir Starmer, to be honest, because you not just had him going after his mate Sadiq Khan, but you also had Trump going after net zero, immigration, and all sorts, really putting Keir Starmer in his place. And you can see Keir Starmer just sat there really, really awkwardly. And you might say it's harsh for Trump to call Sadiq Khan a nasty person, but two things. Firstly, Sadiq Khan has said horrible things about Trump, worse things about Trump, so he deserves it. But second of all, he deserves it because, as you've said, knife crime is up 86% in the last decade and up 60% in just the last 3 years. So clearly it's the last few years where we've really seen a big uptick in this. And Sadiq Khan, I genuinely believe he does not care. I don't think it's the case that he really cares about this, but he's just being a bit incompetent at executing a solution to this issue. You never hear him talking about knife crime.
You
always
don't.
Just talking about diversity and pride and Islamophobia. He doesn't care about kids being stabbed to death.
Reading from sort of that again, Starmer does the same thing. These kind of pre-prepared, vacuous platitudes that are wheeled out, wanging on about diversity as if that's the sort of catch-all answer to any question. It's almost like an old Monty Python sketch or something, where whatever you ask him, he will say, diversity is our greatest strength. And you think, well, no, that's not the... Get annoyed about kids dying, Sadiq. Get really animated about crime on your street. The Met Police are up against it, and you are essential, as the Mayor of London, you're essentially the Police and Crime Commissioner of London as well. And naff all is being done about it. 86% surge in knife crime, and it's under his watch. He can't run away from that. Listen, Chloe, stay with us. We'll have more from Chloe Dobbs in just a second. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
The Pacific tectonic plate, which is a huge, dense piece of rock, which is being forced underneath the continental plate, the Asian continental plate, at 3 inches a year. Now, that might not sound very much, but with the mass that's being pushed there and the build-up of tension means that in this region, this part of the Pacific Rim of Fire, where this happens, you get build-up of incredible tensions and you get a sudden release.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. Loads of comments coming through. We'll go to some of your messages in just a second. Chloe Dobbs is with us. Let's get a word then on this story, Chloe. This just come through as well. England and Wales population surges by 703,000 in a year as migration drives second biggest rise. This is the ONS figures. Over 700,000 in a year, reaching 61.8 million by June last year. Net migration drove nearly all of the increase, with births and death contributing very little to the growth. I mean, there it is. It's a fairly open point on which to talk about this. It's down to migration and nothing else.
Yeah, and it's no surprise. I mean, we saw the figures for what the whole of the UK, where we had over 900,000 net migration one year, and then we had, 745,000, and then seeing for just England and Wales alone, it's 703,000. It's just absolutely crazy. Now, I can't put the blame on Keir Starmer for this figure as much as I'd like to, because that is the year up to June 2024, i.e. just before the general election. But let's ask ourselves, has Keir Starmer, in the year that he has been in power, taken any steps to really start bringing down the figures? And the answer is no. They've decided to put together some white paper about immigration. They've been talking about what they're going to do, but a year in, I mean, start taking some action, guys. We did see the net migration figures start for at least for the UK as a whole, start to drop dramatically after they came into power, but that had nothing to do with Labour. They did try to boast about it and act like it was them, but that was simply because of what the Tories brought in, which was increasing the salary threshold and making it more difficult for students, for example, to bring over like every single member of their family. That meant the figures really started to come down. But I don't think the figure is still way too high. You know, if we're talking about 500,000 versus 1 million net migration, it's still absolutely huge, and Labour needs to go much further. And I think just telling us over and over again, we've put out a white paper, we're thinking about it, when you've been here for a year, is just not good enough, and the public have had enough. They need to see this as a proper emergency and a crisis, and take really tenacious, strong, quick action on it.
Spot on. And kind of tying in on the immigration theme, it's another story of a migrant entering the UK with horrendous child abuse videos. This was a man from Yemen, Osama al-Haddad, caught at Heathrow with 3 grotesque child abuse videos. Also another video of a man having sex with a goat, for goodness sake. He admitted making indecent images but avoided jail due to fear of being forced to fight for the Houthis in Yemen, like anyone gives a toss. And this guy has managed not only to avoid jail, avoid deportation, but also gave a nice thumbs up. How do you deal with a goat botherer like someone like this, a deeply disturbed pervert? And he's allowed to stay.
This is just disgusting, and we get one of these stories almost every single day now. I mean, I think Mike Graham calls it migrant of the day.
Indeed.
It never ends, right? But this one is particularly disgusting in that, a lot of the people who are concerned about illegal migration, they raise concerns about people like paedophiles potentially coming into this country and being allowed to stay. And we get told, oh no, you're just coming up with conspiracy theories, they're not going to be paedophiles. But clearly some of them are, including this bloke. And I'm sorry, but if you're a paedophile, I don't give a damn about your human rights. I don't give a damn if you're worried about how you're going to be treated in Yemen. Off you go, back home. I'm not worried about him not being given a prison sentence, because I don't want him in our prisons, right? I don't want him costing the taxpayer and taking up a space that could be used for a Brit who needs to be behind bars. Just kick him out the country. Send him back to Yemen. I don't care. It's just unbelievable how soft touch we are, and this sends a strong message to people considering crossing the channel or coming here by another illegal means, that if you come here, even if you commit disgusting crimes, you'll be able to stay because your human rights will come at the top. Doesn't matter what you do.
This one's a clue. I don't care whether he's forced to fight for the Houthis or anyone else for that matter. He's a dirty old pervo that shouldn't be in this country. I mean, this is really simple stuff. You don't even need a lawyer to work that one out. Maybe it ties in, though. It's a sort of mentality that snakes its way around our institutions and our systems. And there is a curious juxtaposition with this next story. NHS trust budget nearly 2 million, spent 2 million quid for woke staff events, including International Pronouns Day and talks on embracing your afro hair and breaking the rainbow ceiling. 2 million quid on this stuff. And anyone that sat around a table at a meeting and said, I think we need to have an Embrace Your Pronouns Day, an International Pronouns Day. Anyone who comes up with that, the boss should have gone, yeah, thanks for your time, you're fired, get out. I mean, who's coming up? This is the NHS, for God's sake. They're meant to make people better.
They are meant to make people better, and the serious part about this story is not just that money is being wasted on this woke ridiculousness and these woke events, is that time is crucially being wasted. So it's been estimated that 26,000 NHS working hours have been lost to staff attending these woke events. My understanding is that they can go to one of these events as part of their paid hours, right? It's not something they do after work for fun optionally, no. Right? You can be paid whilst attending it when you could literally be treating a patient. I mean, how on earth can you justify that when you've agreed to the Hippocratic oath as a doctor that you're going to do the best to keep your patients alive? You're more interested in learning about diversity and, embracing people's afros than actually helping patients. I mean, that's just crazy to me that the NHS would even allow that. And I think that this woke plague is very much still alive and kicking in the NHS, even after that Supreme Court judgment, which we thought brought a little bit of sanity to the NHS. There's clearly still this
indeed. Another one was
mindset amongst many of the staff.
Embracing asexuality was another day. You could have gone on one of those little. I don't know what they did on that day. Probably not very much, by all accounts. Who knows? But listen, Chloe, great to have you on as ever. Chloe Dobbs, political commentator. Thank you to her.